Hello everybody, and a very warm welcome from my side. My name is Ruth Lemmen. I'm the host of this panel discussion on serious game and incubation. I would like to go a little bit deeper into the subject in the first place. We are focusing on serious games, very much in contrast to games for entertainment only, also in contrast to gamification or VR, XR, AR applications. So the main focus of this panel discussion is incubation within the scope of serious games production. We want to investigate how serious games call maybe for a different entrepreneurial approach and therefore also maybe for a different incubation training. So we want to find out whether there are specific needs when it comes to incubation for serious games production. I would like to welcome all panelists in the first place, and I'm very happy that you have joined me all here in this online session. I would like to start with Natasha. Hello, Natasha. Natasha Skult started as a CEO and creative director of MyTale, a game development company from Finland. Natasha, you are focusing on narrative-driven experiences in mixed reality and gamification. You are also doing work for the IGDA on an international level, but also as a chairperson for IGDA in Finland. Thank you very much for joining our session here today, Natasha. Also, I would like to mention that you are the founder and elected chairperson of the Hive Turku Game Hub. I think we will discuss this a little bit later. So you have also experiences with incubation, which is very much enriching our panel here. So the next one to join our panel is Per. Per Backlund holds a PhD from Stockholm University and is currently professor for information technology at the University of Skövde. He has been an active researcher in the field of serious games since 2005. His specialization is game-based and simulation-based training. And very much I would like to welcome Per to this panel here. Thank you very much for joining us. Then we have Mikkel. Mikkel is sitting in a nighttime perfect studio, which is great. Mikkel Lodahl is the director of the Institute for Danish Game Development at Dania Academy in Grenaa in Denmark. He has taught systems development, narrativity and business development there for more than a decade already. And he also acts as an advisor both for games companies and the European Commission on video game related matters. And that's why we know each other as well, Mikkel, right? Thank you very much for joining us here in this panel. The next one is Kerstin Schütt. Hello, Kerstin. She is co-founder of Twisted Ramble Games, a small Berlin-based indie studio, which is nestled between serious games and entertainment software. Twisted Ramble Games are currently doing a crowdfunding campaign at Kickstarter for their first game they are actually developing. And the game is called Duru, and it's a game on depression, but not for the people that are themselves concerned, but more for the people in the environment of people suffering from this illness, and how to act with those people when they are having a depression. We will discuss this a little bit further later on. I'm happy that Kerstin is joining us here, and that we can discuss this matter with her later on with more detail. Then last but not least, we have Sebastian Deterding. He's a senior research fellow with the Digital Creativity Labs in York in the UK and founder and principal of the boutique design agency called Coding Conduct, creating gameful and playful experiences touching millions of users for clients, very renowned clients such as the BBC, BMW, Deutsche Telekom, and many more. For a start, I would like to give you some definitions to give us the basis for our discussion here. The definition of serious games is always evolving and much debated. So I now quote a definition by Stefan Goebel, a German fellow colleague from the industry, from his publication Fundamentals, Concepts and Practice from the year 2016. And he says a serious game is a digital game that was created with the intention to entertain and to achieve at least one additional goal. For example, learning or health. This is for the definition of serious game. The definition of gamification. It is sometimes characterized as the use of game design elements in non-game contexts. This week, this quote is from Sebastian Deterding, who is part of our panel here, and others from the title, from the book or the publication, From Game Design Elements to Gamefulness, Defining Gamification from the year 2011. I just quoted you, Sebastian, so now I would like to start the discussion with you. You, as an internationally renowned game researcher and editor and author of manifold pertaining publications such as The Gameful World from the year 2015. For you, in most of your publications, you focus has been very much on gamification in contrast to, or more on gamification than on serious games. If you want to maybe give us some insights on the distinction between serious games and gamification. So could you tell us in a nutshell what the most important elements are there for you?
Sure. So I've worked in both fields. So I've both done literal serious games in order, for instance, to help people understand better how fears work as part of cognitive behavioral therapy, in kind of phobia, classic anti-phobia therapy, as well as gamified applications for increasing, for instance, physical activity and exercise for people with type 2 diabetes. So I'm kind of familiar in a practical sense as well as a theoretical sense with both fields. To me, the main motivating difference between the two is that the majority of serious games we see these days, other than the fact that they're kind of full-fledged games versus elements of games or game design processes that we apply elsewhere, that's kind of the formal difference, so to speak. So I make a game, and it's a game first and foremost, versus I take inspiration from games and apply them elsewhere. That would be kind of the formal gamification versus serious games. I think the most interesting difference is in the logic model or theory of change, how people in development work often call that. That is, how do they affect change in people? In serious games, I think the majority of serious games that I've seen have a kind of communication logic model. That is, you engage with the serious game, you do something in the serious game, and thereby you learn something, or you think differently about something, and you feel differently about something. And those kinds of changes to your thinking and your emotion hopefully then transfer into a different situation where then you take action or make a decision differently. So you treat somebody with a mental illness with slightly less prejudice than you did before because you learned about, say, a particular mental illness in a game, or you learned something in a game and then hopefully what you learned in the game you apply in a different context. So that's the logic model. It's a kind of learning and communication logic model. In gamification, it's not, I try to communicate something and then you apply it elsewhere. It's, can I make the action or decision that you take directly more enjoyable, appealing, or interesting, so you're more likely to take this particular action. So rather than telling you that hand washing is a good thing, can I design the water faucet in such a way that you enjoy hand washing more, or that it's easier for you to do the hand washing in a way that would apply with kind of good standards of hand washing hygiene, right, in speaking in the COVID context. So I think that's the basic difference for me in logic model. I try to reshape the action when and where it's taking place, versus I try to teach you something and hopefully you will remember that and apply that when you take the action or take a decision.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. That was really interesting. So, Kerstin, you are actually developing a serious game. Following the definition Sebastian just gave us, I think this is a serious game that you are actually developing. So, why did you decide to develop a serious game, Kerstin?
when I came into games, I was very much into narrative design, and I was looking a lot at movies. And movies have these, not all of them, but they have this way of conveying a message through what is shown on the screen. And for me, it's very interesting to do the same thing by stuff you do yourself on the screen. So I wanted to make games that have these power to understand something better and maybe to change your behavior or to help you with whatever you're struggling with. And so I wanted to do that, and now I'm doing it with my team.
The title you are actually working on, Kerstin, is called Duo, but your decision as a team has been for not only to develop serious games for this title, for this first title, because you just founded the company, but you want to go on developing serious games. And you met your fellow colleagues at the university. Was there any support from the professors, or did they initiate you on the development of serious games rather than on entertainment games? Was there any support within your studies to go in this direction?
I think to some point there wasn't a subject like specifically for serious games. But with all the projects we did during our studies, they always motivate us to experiment. Was it with like different styles or also different input systems, for example, like with augmented reality and mixed reality and stuff like this. And so looking at games at what they can do was highly encouraged.
Okay, and did they help you also with the entrepreneurial proceedings? Did they teach you how to found a company or what you have to take into consideration while you are founding a company, like what target groups you want to address, what business models you want to define, stuff like that? Was that at all part of your studies at university?
It wasn't part of the game design course. The only thing we had, which was vaguely going in the direction, was basically law and how it applies to games. But at the School of Applied Science, there was the summer university for entrepreneurship, and there we learned a lot. And also there's the startup incubator, where you can go if you want to found your company, and they help you. And there's also a scholarship program. Not directly at games, but for startups in general.
Okay, very interesting. Maybe we will discuss this further a little bit later. Mikkel, now I would like to address you. You are not only teaching game design and programming, you are also preparing your teams for the business world in the form of pre-incubation. Please tell us, what are you doing when you come across a team that is creating serious games?
Well, I try to introduce them to a lot of the literature about it, because a lot of the students who think that they want to do serious games haven't actually read anything about it and think that they're the first people who have ever thought of doing this. So since I know of quite a lot of people around Europe who are doing this sort of stuff, I try to introduce them to some of the texts, because that's the easy way in. Then I try to discuss with them the main differences between trying to do entertainment games and trying to do serious games. And I think that the biggest difference and the biggest challenge for let's say the classical game student, is that you have to communicate with a very different audience when you do serious games, because when you try to communicate to people about what's fun in a game, you're mostly talking to gamers or people who are inside the industry when you're trying to get financing and that sort of stuff. But if you are trying to figure out how to make a game that works in a particular clinical or health context, or in an educational context, then you're suddenly discussing things with people who haven't played 200 hours of EVE Online or something like that, right? So you have people who have a very different way of thinking about games, a very different vocabulary. I think that in the time that I have worked with this, and I'm pretty sure everyone here would agree, there has become more of an acceptance that games can do this sort of thing. So people are much more positive when you communicate with them about how you can use a game for something else than entertainment. But it's still a gap, and it's a gap because a lot of my students, at least, and I think a lot of game students have learned a lot of the way they communicate by communicating with other people who play a lot of games, and they need to understand that there are many different ways of thinking about the world and many different ways of thinking about games. Because basically, if you try to make a serious game, you have to understand one of the ways the world works that is different from the context that you usually are in, and try to model that in some way. So I think that would be my approach in like, that's a very concrete thing, giving them some text, introducing them to some stuff, but then in a very abstract way, I would try to turn them more onto like classical software development, understanding how users want to accomplish something rather than how users have fun in the game, basically.
You mentioned one point that is very important, Mikkel, the common language. If you are a game developer and you work on a game with a doctor, for example, then you have to define a common language. You have to define the goals, what you want to achieve with the game, and what the overall goals of the project are. Also what your approaches towards work are in general. For this you need people that are very much coping with different languages and that can serve as a kind of a translator, so that you achieve that you gain the most out of the project as planned. So Mikkel, would you say that serious games the serious games industry is very much different from the entertainment games industry?
I think that depends a lot on where you are and which country you're in, basically. I can speak mostly to the Danish games industry because that's my field, but I know there's a lot of European games industries that feel like that as well. And in Denmark we have a couple of large companies and then very, very many smaller companies. And when you look at the smaller companies, they usually live by doing some sort of serious games or gamification on the side of trying to do entertainment games. I think that if I'm confronted by a student who wants to work with serious games, I want to make sure that they want to work with serious games, right? Because you need to make sure that you're not actually trying to do this just because you need to pay the bills, which a lot of people end up in doing that. You have to actually be curious about this field. You have to be curious about a lot of different fields, basically. And I think that's the main difference between the entertainment games industry and the serious games industry. That in the entertainment games industry, you can sort of burrow down and do a lot of specialization. I've been reading some of the discussions on Twitter. I don't remember who said it, but who talked about how we got to a point where we spent 6 months trying to do high fidelity grass leaves and that sort of stuff. And we do that because people burrow down and they want to really specialize into something here, which is a very excellent approach to do something like that. But if you are trying to do serious games, then you probably have to be able to switch around a lot more and be able to try to understand what's going on over here, and how do I prod someone in the right way here, and how do I make sure that people learn something here, right? What's my audience here versus what's my audience here, rather than how do I solve this technical challenge. And as I work mainly with programmers, so that's always an interesting discussion with the programmers, trying to get them to think about human problems as well.
Thank you very much, Mikkel. I think it became clear that the audience has to be very much in the focus if you are developing a serious game, and not only the audience as such, but also the specific needs this audience has. Thank you very much. Natasha, I would like to to ask you a question. Your company is developing serious games, and what was your motivation to develop serious games? And do you think that for capitalization or for being profitable as a company while developing serious games, that you need different strategies for example, fundraising, for business models, for definition of audiences, for channeling the communication, for the overall planning, of marketing strategies, and so on?
Yes, thank you for the question. I believe there is a huge potential to because our lives are already gamified. I mean, with all of this. So basically, utilizing now the know-how from the industry, which is doing amazing. I mean, the games themselves are already incredible tools of teaching. When you think about any game, any single game, from the casual one, idle, whatever mobile game to AAA console game, they all have the same aspects where they're onboarding the player, no matter what background and knowledge and everything else is. It has the whole, so rules of the game, the world, the everything. So you are on board. So there are the steps how that works, and then how the player, how things go throughout and through discovery in the game, kind of, so the game design decisions that were made from the team basically guide this learning of the player. And discoveries are something that at least we know from the learning perspective, like how people learn or how people, especially in the therapy and so on. So basically, self-motivation is a crucial thing. So the problem what we have here, so this is where it comes from the commercial side, why we decided to go rogue, flip the table, and go to do our own company, is exactly because we as individuals, not just being parents and a bunch of PhD nerds and all of that, but because of also we really believe that there is incredible opportunity there, business-wise as well, obviously, because we need to feed our families, but as well having this sort of to make actual difference in the market, because the serious games markets, unfortunately, and I'm bold to say this, I know, but there is no hit out there. And there are several reasons why that is. And I will again be bold to say this because I'm a certified teacher, so I can say that. Like this sort of like as a metaphor, teachers should not be making games. So the thing is that game developers together with teachers have to, so experts from the different areas, because the whole game development, regardless what kind of games we are talking about, are the teamwork and are required expertise from various disciplines. So this is why just developers making serious games makes no sense. Just teachers, healthcare professionals, industrial engineering, let's say some architects want to do some VR stuff, makes no sense. But together with the designers who actually, so together, and it's all about communication and listening. That's where the key is. And this is where so one of our missions as a company is actually, because we are independent, and this is where we also keep our independency with the B2B services, especially in VR and AR. That's what we do for the bigger companies. So this is where so we don't depend on investors, publishers, so because they always follow what market needs. No, we want to actually do the dirty work of researching, experimenting, doing things that otherwise, like you wouldn't do. And the only way to do it is that you're financially dependent. So this is what our company does and why we decided to kind of completely swoop off all these sort of things that usually people do. And yeah, I also work a lot with students, as Mikkel said, also kind of like how to, and also this sort of how to start your business, because it's not easy, and definitely not in this field. But things are changing. And I said, like, there's a gap also in communication between different industries, education, healthcare, and whatnot, and the gaming industry, because there is a taboo that serious games are, boring, stupid, this and that. Like, it's not engaging, it's not really, and you can see that quite often. Even if I would tell you, so I have a new edu game, do you want to try? And most of the people would say, do I really have to? So basically, instead of that, it would be to actually have something that one can kind of, yeah, I really do, so that there is this kind of image of the serious games, and gamified solutions would not have that kind of seriousness to it, because it's not necessarily serious as it is. It's only the tool, just like everything else that we use in our day-to-day work, especially as developers, regardless on the product, is that like these things are tools. Technology is tool, and if there is no one using it, it's useless. So that's why we do what we do.
Okay, Per, you are at the University of Skövde as a professor, and there is also a master's program for serious games. You also did a lot of publications in this special field. One of your most recent studies deals with business intelligence and indie publishing. So in your point of view, is there a difference between publishing an entertainment game to publishing a serious game?
Yeah, I would guess it is. But just to clarify, the recent things that I have been involved with about business analytics is not particularly geared towards serious games. That's more geared towards entertainment games. But I would guess that many of the problems are same anyway. But just to clarify, anyway, when I thought about those questions that you sent out and started to characterize entertainment games versus serious games, then to my mind, at least the way that I understand the work of the incubator here and what they expect from the students when they get there, is that they try to focus the students on mass market, on global thinking globally, creating a need, creating a market for themselves, or creating an interest, market driven in that sense. Whereas I think that what we more teach in our serious games study program is much more geared towards serious games. It's about solving a problem for someone, about trying to understand for example, an educational problem, or if you work with the healthcare sector, a healthcare problem, or whatever sector you're in, and then translate that understanding or the solution to that problem into a serious game or into a gamified solution somehow. So what we try to communicate that in that sense is that if we want to design and develop a game, that's hard enough in itself. If you then add on the thing that it should also solve a problem for someone, that is likely to be even harder. And that is the kind of challenge that they should be equipped to deal with, to handle. And you were talking earlier about the, and Mikkel also, about the maybe going to the traditional software engineering or system development, where you analyze problems and you try to create a solution. And I think we're doing a lot of that. But over the years, we have actually come to think more of this process as a mutual learning process between the developers and the clients, in that the developers, they have to understand the domain they're working in. Obviously, if you're in the healthcare sector and if you're supposed to develop a game for stroke rehabilitation, you have to understand a lot of things about the stroke and what kind of rehabilitation is required and how it works, etc. Kind of obvious. But we also think that there is an ongoing learning process in the other direction also, that the domain experts can benefit from actually learning and understanding the potential of the game or using a game, because what we have found in several projects is that the perception of the game and what the game can do when you come to a client is very crude. The typical idea is that we know that games are great, they create motivation. We have this incredibly boring thing, we want motivation. And that's the basic understanding, that's their starting point. And we have found that throughout projects, when you work with clients, when you discuss with clients, they come to understand more of the potential. You know, they come to understand that it can be more than counting points, or it can be more than collecting medals or whatever. And then that actually triggers their creativity, and they become better in expressing their needs. So in that sense, we found it very valuable to work with prototype-driven development, because typically you cannot explain that to a domain expert outside the game development area, because they don't really understand, or they cannot visualize it really good. But if you have a prototype, they can absolutely visualize it, and then they can come with new requirements, they can come with new ideas, and hopefully then develop a better product. So that's why we focus a lot on teaching our students a prototype-driven, rapid development approach when they work with their clients. I'd say that's at the core of our teaching philosophy in the study program.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you very much, Per. Sebastian, in your article on the maturing of gamification research from the year 2017, you mentioned that many startups and design agencies emerged nowadays to offer gamification design or software as a service packages. Today, it seems gamification is an established practice and industry segment. So my question is, in your view, does gamification require a different business mentality and vision in comparison with games for entertainment development?
I think so, pretty much, and I think it very much aligns with the differences between entertainment games and serious games. So first off, be aware if you get into this business, it's precarious either way. So if you go into gamification or serious games, this is a very precarious market. You're going to be a small, medium-sized enterprise desperately struggling for funding, desperately struggling for clients, or for publishers in the case of entertainment games. So that's the baseline that all of them share. And then I think the major difference is entertainment games are a business-to-consumer model. You are marketing directly to consumers who ideally all decide to buy your game. That's where you try to go global, etc. And therefore you shoot for a publisher who's going to fund your development time, who you have to convince that you will be able to move a certain large number of units to a particular target audience. Both in serious games and gamification, we're talking about a business-to-business model, where the person who is paying the development is not the person who's going to be using your game or your gamified service. It's going to be a healthcare provider. It's going to be a public service agency that wants to market a message. It's going to be an educational publisher. So in the same way that educational books work, right? As an educational book writer, you're not directly selling your books to the students. You're selling them to the schools or to the people who do the provision of books for the schools. That's a very different kind of market model. That's a market model in which it is essential for you to know, how do I speak to the people who procure? How do I speak to the clients who procure this, the managers, the procurers in a healthcare provider or in an educational publisher, what have you? What are the kind of numbers and things they care about, which are different things, different numbers, different outcome metrics than an entertainment game publisher cares about? And yes, how do I speak to them? Well, we already touched upon the issue of language. How do I build trust? How do I get a foot in the door with these kinds of potential clients, and how do I become visible to them? It's not how do I become visible to the large audiences of players out there. It's how do I become visible to the 15 or 20 companies in my country that have to do with, say, healthcare rehabilitation? And how do I market? How do I demonstrate my expertise? How do I become credible so that they're willing to hire me? And how do I then structure my kind of service provision, my offering, the kind of financial packages or the kind of deals that I offer that they understand and that they're familiar with dealing with other kinds of service provider or technology development providers? I think that's both for gamification, serious games, the major difference, that where knowledge about marketing and business developing and financing from entertainment games does not necessarily transfer.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. Natasha, I would like to discuss with you the role of the game designer. In many cases, I think the specific learning objectives are defined before the game is designed. In your experience, and I know you have a vast experience in the field as an incubation coach and as well as a serious games developer, how does this work, for example, with a game like Qplay, which gamefully explores quantum technologies?
This is actually a really good question, and thank you for it, because this actually comes, I have some kind of addition to what Sebastian said, because exactly like, how do you actually now do that in practice? First of all, we are making products that are user-centric, because the fact is, not necessarily the professionals in the field are using the actual product, but their clients. So if we think about students, if we think about people who are in the therapy, so these are the users. So that's the actual end user. Now there are every product and every single design is unique. And this is where it comes. You can't really have, there is no kind of, let's say, even for the physiotherapy, or for example, one of the biggest projects we have been working on is a speech and language therapy. There is every single aspect, and when it comes to the learning itself, the end user again, we have to think about that. People or children or whichever, doesn't matter, the clients as the final users, as individuals, we all learn and perceive things differently. So that's why we have to make sure when we design these things that we are user-centric, like the design has to be focused on the final user, while of course now depending what the professionals, like the one who actually needs this tool as healthcare professional or educator by any means, or whoever needs to kind of like, what kind of aspects, what kind of aims are their final goal that this user should achieve through that process of creating the actual platform. The thing is that it also has to make sense. So the thing is, even if you have a client from the whichever discipline that comes to say, we need this, you as a designer or you as a team of developers, you must be very clear, because as experts, you have to say what works and doesn't work. So if when I get a client who just got a funding, let's say to make some VR stuff, or got and then it says like, okay, we need this and we want this as an outcome, like this is the goal, because this is what I want to hear first. What do you want to achieve with this? And if I see that there is absolutely no point of using VR for that, what they want, but there are other ways, other, not just game design, but game technology options that actually could be utilized much better for the needs of that final product, I'm going to be honest and say it, which is something I think it's really important for the teams also. This is something that I'm trying as well to tell them, that it's not about you saying no, but make sure that you as an expert also take this in, so listen to your client or potential client, find this solution together, because that's the thing, they don't have a clue what the gaming technology can do, you do. And also you don't have much of the clue, except of course we all must do obviously research of the topic as we start working with the partners, but the point is they are experts in that, so you trust them there, but they have to trust you. So this is the whole dance between the expert, that like we do this together. That's what I was already saying in the beginning. There is no way that one or the other leads. It has to be the joint dance.
Building up on what Sebastian just said and what Natasha explained, I would like to turn the discussion more towards incubation now. And I would like you to give short answers, as our time is running short. Kerstin, if you are entering an incubation space, what expectations would you have as a serious games developer? What would you expect from a space like that?
For us, actually, the most challenging part was the financial part, and since we're doing the Kickstarter, it kind of still is, and how to structure a business around serious games that are closer to entertainment. So we are somewhere in between, and it's kind of an advantage, but also kind of a problem for us. So having somebody who has more experience in either or both of these fields helping us develop the business would be very helpful. Also, getting connected with experts who maybe have worked before with game developers would be also great, because sometimes it's hard to get the point across, especially when you're doing first contact in an email, what you're actually doing and what you want to achieve and how they can help or may want to help you. Doing this first step in communication is also a bit challenging.
Thank you very much. Mikkel, I would like to ask you, when it comes to incubation, I would like to give you an example here from Berlin. We have a space called Drivery, and their overall theme of the incubation is mobility. They are focusing on that overall topic and not so much on serious gaming or gaming in general. But there might be also some serious games or gaming companies involved in this incubation space, but only if they are interested in the overall topic of the Drivery, which is mobility. Do you think that this is a worthwhile approach? Do you think that incubation centers should have an overall topic?
You want a short answer? Well, I think that in general the same issues that all small companies and startup companies face are faced by games companies as well. That they are people who are very focused on their own field usually, and they need business experience. I think that the idea of focusing on one theme rather than one industry is probably actually a pretty good place to start when you do serious games, because then you have a topic for how you teach people to talk about this. In the incubation place that we have, the hub that we have in Grenaa, which is called Game Hub Denmark, there's usually a lot of time is spent on trying to get people to talk to publishers, but communicating with other people is the key here, right? And I think that might be easier if you don't say you are in the games industry, because then if you only focus on games companies, then you will get a lot of the same people. But if you focus on a theme, then you will get people who are interested in that theme. I think off the top of my head, this is an excellent idea to do that, to have that sort of approach, and would make it easier to do a more standardized version of incubation, because basically what you need is to be able to very, very individually work with these companies and get them to speak to the industries where they are supposed to be working and doing serious games with, right? Because it's a very, very, very different audience, and it's a very different discipline speaking to the people who use serious games from speaking to the people who use entertainment games and who fund entertainment games. Also, as you said, funding schemes. I think that would also be a very good idea to look into when you incubate serious games.
Okay, thank you. Per, your university is very much affiliated to the Swedish Game Incubator. Could you tell us about your experience there? Are there serious game developers joining the incubator, and do you think their needs are being appropriately addressed?
I think that we started our first game development programs in 2002, and those were that was a game design regular, and it's a bachelor degree program. So shortly after that, maybe 2004 or 2005, the first team from the university, that was a project team from one of our courses, came to the incubator and said, we want to start a company, but it's a game studio. And then that was completely new to the people at the incubator, because they were previously working with other types of, general IT industry projects typically. So I think that learning process started already there. And then over the years, we have tried different approaches at the university. So for example, when we started the Serious Games Master Program, we actually had a course about entrepreneurship and business development as a part of the program, but that never really took off because we weren't able to really integrate it into a meaningful and interesting part of the overall study program. So we dropped that, and we simply thought that, okay, we leave the business part to the incubator. And I think that it is, that is quite characteristic for all of our study program. We do not do very much on the business side. Obviously, we bring it up in different courses in different ways, and we try to, talk about all those issues, but we don't really have a strong focus on it. The focus is more on game design and game development. So we've had several teams every year who go to the incubator. Some of those teams have come with something that I would characterize as a serious games idea. I have a feeling that they have been dealt with in the same way as any other team who would come. As far as I know, we have not really had a specific process for serious games incubation. But we've also seen that students have tried to utilize things from the university. Sorry?
I think there's a problem with the connection. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Does it work from my side?
Yeah, now I can hear you as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry.
So as a very concrete example, we've had teams who went to the incubator after their bachelor degree, and then they went to the incubator with the game idea and the project, and they started their company, and then they did our master program on part-time in parallel with developing their company. And then they could actually use a lot of the opportunities that we have at the university to think about designing good evaluation setups, those kind of things that weren't typically not then a part of the incubation program. And when I talk about evaluation in this sense, I mean the type of evaluation that you have to do towards the client. The question, does this solve the problem? Does this work in the context that you want to use it? Those kinds of evaluation issues that were typically missing in the incubation then. When it comes to business models, a bit more tricky. As we already mentioned before, maybe one very typical business model for serious games is developing by commission or for a separate client. But I think that we've also seen some companies who actually went more towards mass market or traditional market, for example in kids games, learning games in different topics, which are more intended towards the open market, parents buying them for their kids, those kinds of things. And I guess that's closer to like an off-the-shelf business model. But to be honest, I think that one of the things that I found it very hard to understand throughout the years is what is the good business model for serious games. And part of that is that I'm not a business person. I'm an academic and I'm super happy to be so. But I also think that if there was, I would be able to understand it. But it seems that it's still a challenge, or rather the challenge is that the possible markets for serious games and the possible business models for serious games are so diverse that there is, I guess, no silver bullet in that sense. So I guess that is the challenge from the incubation perspective. But we regularly talk with our colleagues at the incubator, and we are aware of the problem, and we hope that we'll be able to, provide the best guidance possible for those who want to pursue serious games as a business.
That was a very good closing word. We don't have the silver bullet yet. To summarize, there are a lot of challenging issues you have to tackle when you are a serious game developer, and I think we also agreed on the fact that when it comes to incubation, this is even more challenging because you need a lot of experts from different strands, and you need to take a lot of things into account when you are developing a serious game because you have to tackle different audiences, and the game nevertheless has to be authentic and enjoyable. So thank you very much, all of you, Sebastian, Peer, Mikkel, Natasha, and Kerstin. Thanks for being with me here, and it was a pleasure to talk to you, but the discussion is now over here. We invite the audience to take an active part in the live discussion, and for this to follow us to the Q&A room as indicated. Goodbye for now. Talk to you later.